Hi everyone, my name is Dickie, and I want to share with you the story of how my family disowned me. I agree that this is hard to believe, and any normal person will first think that this is a monstrous act, that you can't do this, and that only monsters are capable of it. But you know what? All. What is done is all for the best. I saw this for myself, because after this incident, I became a really happy teenager. I was born in a family where there were usually no guests, where the house was always a mess, and usually there was nothing to eat except semi finished products or fast food. At first, let me tell you about every member of my family. This is my father, Pays, who is older than middle aged, but still has a strong personality, such an energetic man with a huge mustache. My dad always liked to dress brightly, like a red jacket or a fun hat. My father didn't know where he worked. It was like this all his life. Maybe I don't know where he works, or no one knows, but he was clearly doing something illegal. I wasn't interested in the details, so I just kept out of his business. My mother, Susanna, loved herself, her nails, and her stupid dog, Linda, too much to have time for her own children. I don't remember my mother ever cooking food from the stove. And in general, we only needed the kitchen in the house to eat, but not to cook. If my mother didn't eat, she was surfing the internet or flipping through magazines with a dog in her arms. She didn't work because my father provided for us well enough. I also have a brother, Palmer. He was as dumb as our dog. Palmer looked like the Pope, was the same full and narrow-minded as both parents. I know you can't say that, but it's true. None of my ancestors had even finished high school, and Palmer was almost on the dropout list. It is not clear at all who I went to. I was not like any of these three, either in appearance or character. Thank God, in brain. I was different. Palmer often joked about how I was stupidly thrown and that I was not native. But I was not particularly upset, but on the contrary. As you already understood, I didn't find a common language with my family, so I didn't really talk. Usually, I'd come home from school, lock myself in my room, do my homework, prepare my sandwiches. While I was doing my homework, I would eat a meal, after, or rest, or go for a walk. I had a couple of friends. They were cool guys. One of them I was best friends with. His name is Ryan. This is my best friend, and we lived not far from each other, on the next street. Ryan always helped me with my lessons or whatever. Every time my parents went on a party, he and his mother would leave me at their house so I could spend the night there in peace. I just loved those moments. Ryan's home environment was very different. He didn't have a father, but his cool mom was so kind. When I came, his mother would cook a delicious dinner, meat with vegetables, casserole, spaghetti, or something else homemade. I loved this kind of food, and I was tired of sandwiches for a long time. Ryan's mother was surprised when I told her about my parents, and felt sorry for me. I knew she was right when she said it shouldn't be like this. It would be nice to stay at Ryan's house. By the way, he asked me to stay more than once, and each time I wanted to, but I couldn't. I knew how my crazy ancestors would react. They would make a big deal of it and yell at the whole street that I had been stolen. And then what should have happened? Palmer loved trying on her clothes and putting on makeup without knowing it. I knew it because I saw it. He promised to kill me if I told, so I didn't. Once again, while parents were out, Palmer ran to the parents' bedroom, and this time he's a little over the top. I told you he's a chubby guy, and he's gained even more recently. Anyway, he tore up my mom's Chanel dress, which was super expensive. At that moment, my mother came home, and this idiot ran out to her, shouting that I had torn her dress. My mother believed her beloved son and gave me a beating. I got so that it did not seem enough. After the punishment, I was so angry that I ran into Palmer's room, pushed him off the chair, and started hitting him in the face. My mother ran to our screams, picked me up, pushed me out the door, and said that I was not a child, but an animal. My father came in the evening and gave me a punishment for it. Palmer was an innocent child. I was so tired of the injustice that I started to cry. My parents, feeling sorry for the older one, pointed a finger at the door. The father shouted that I was no longer his son. I ran out of the house and ran wherever I could see. I've never felt this bad before. No, I'm not upset that I got kicked out. I'm upset that everything is so unfair to me. It took strength and patience. I ran, not knowing where, in the end. My feet led me to a familiar house. A house with which I associate only good things. A house where I am warm and cozy, where I am always welcome. Hi, Dickie. Come in, of course, said Ryan and his mother to me. They gave me a delicious dinner, during which I described the situation. Ryan's mother was horrified, and then made a bed for me in Ryan's room. I lived there for 4 days. On the fourth day, my parents came to my school. Suddenly, my mother and father began to apologize. They asked me to forgive them, offered to buy toys, books, and I did not understand what was happening. I came home in the evening and didn't recognize the house. It was clean for the first time in my life. My mother did the cleaning herself, cooked dinner, and everyone was at the common table, eating with appliances and treating me. I was alarmed by the behavior, but I ate and went to my room. At night, I went to the kitchen for a drink of water and heard the family talking. Do you realize that we can stay outside, right? Why did your mother choose Dickie and leave him the house as her inheritance? He can kick us out, you know, my mother shouted at my father, and Dad yelled back at her that it was all her fault for giving birth to someone as defective as me. And then it all became clear to me. My grandmother left the house to me, in which we lived, so it is rightfully mine. But I didn't want to live with them. I wanted to live alone now, because they were away from me. I took out a recorder and recorded everything my parents said about me, including that they wished me dead. The next day, the police and guardianship authorities heard the recording, and Ryan and his mother were next to me. As a result, my parents were deprived of the rights, even jailed for a while for threatening me, and Palmer and I were supposed to be sent to boarding school, but I didn't want to go there. At this point, Ryan's mother offered to help me, and I agreed. She adopted me. After we finished everything, we moved into my big house, and the three of us lived there. Now I had a new family, much better and kinder, just like I wanted. What would you do if you were me? Write your opinion in the comments, put likes, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
My name is Mars. You can't imagine that you can live on the level of almost homeless with rich parents. Most importantly, I chose to be poor myself. Now I will tell you everything, and you can subscribe to this channel. There are a lot of interesting stories here. I live in a large family. In addition to my parents, I have 5 brothers and sisters. Our dad has been working as a foreman for a private firm all his life, and my mom keeps track of all of us, her kids. I'm the oldest in the family. My mother told me that God himself sent me to them because they were married early, but they couldn't have children for a long time. Years passed, medicine did not help. My mother grew old, and hope ran out. But one day, in a moment of utter desperation, luck smiled on them and I appeared. And after me, as if by magic, 5 more were born. I agree that our living conditions are poor, but Mom and Dad were never discouraged. As long as I can remember, they were always overjoyed at the birth of another baby. Dad enthusiastically chose the names of newborns, and one child was the favorite of the other. My father always said that financial difficulties were a temporary problem. The main thing is that we still did not starve, and the good thing was that we were all healthy. The children were getting an education. We were still happy. This year I turned 18 years old. Instead of cake, my mother baked cookies, so it was cheaper, but it was still nice. We dined modestly and all went to bed, except my parents and me. They asked me to stay another half hour. I could see the worry in their eyes. They were terribly nervous. I began to worry. We sat down on the sofa, and my mother for some reason began to tell a story from her youth. Son, you know your dad and I got married early, and for a while we couldn't have children. Desperate, I went to look for a job as a nanny. I wanted so much to have children, but God didn't give it to us. So I decided to work in this field. My mother began the story. Then she took my hand, and Dad sat down next to me. His breath almost stopped. My mother continued. She went on to say that she was hired by a young family. They were very interesting people. They then only matured some business. They tried to start a business, but there was one but. They had a little kid who they did not have time to look after. So they looked for a nanny and found me. So I began to raise and educate this baby. Years passed, the couple began to get richer and richer, in time to devote less and less to the child. They were delayed by work and huge profits. My mother said. Well, then according to her, the couple was going to go to another country to expand the business, and this nanny was asked to look after the child. They promised to send money for maintenance. In general, that child was you, Mars, my mother said, somewhat guilty. I almost fell off the sofa in surprise. Of course, it all fits together now, which is why my mother avoided the subject of me being born. I was surprised at first, then I was afraid, and then I felt anger, mixed with resentment. How could they do this to me? They prefer work to their only child? Is it that much they didn't care about me? Mom and Dad saw my indignation and hugged me tight. I couldn't stand it and started crying. Dad said they haven't shown up since, but when my mother came home with my prophecies, my father was very happy. He had heard a lot about me from my mother and had already fallen in love with me in absentia. You were sent to us by heaven. After you, God gave us 5 more children. I could only dream of this before. I'm sorry that we hid all this, but we immediately agreed to tell everything on your coming of age, Dad said. I suddenly had images of people I didn't know, a house, and my mother, only at a young age. They were probably memories, not strange dreams. I asked where they were now and what they were doing. My father told me that they are very rich now. They have a big business, a whole chain of hypermarkets in several cities. Also, according to my father, he tried to contact them several times, not because he doesn't love me, but because he thinks it's his duty. And for the last time, they answered the phone. I looked at him questioningly, and he went to the door and opened it without a word. There were people on the doorstep of our house that I had seen many times on TV, in magazines, in ads on the internet, but I didn't even know that I was their son. They were dressed in expensive clothes. A woman and a man entered the house, carrying a pile of gifts. They didn't know where to start the conversation, and then all of a sudden they wished me a happy birthday, handed me the car keys, and said that this gift was in my yard. Then they gave me some cards with money in the account, said that I could buy anything I wanted. Then they offered to fly with them to France for the holidays. They were getting closer to me. I turned my head and saw my parents go into the room. My mother was crying. I knew it was painful for her to do this, but my parents are honest and fair. They gave me the choice. My father looked at me in a depressed state and said that they would come later. Those two very loudly told without interruption how good it is in this or that country. They sat on the floor at my feet and looked into my eyes, as if trying to beg forgiveness for all these years. I had nothing to say. I got up from the couch and yelled, "Mom, Dad, come here!" My parents returned a second later. The businessman got up from the floor and asked if I wanted to go out and see the car or fly somewhere right now. "Anywhere. Tell us where and we'll fly right away. You just say what you want and we'll do it for you, son," the woman said. And I asked them to take the gifts back and not call me son anymore. That's what it means. I read that you can no longer have children, and once you didn't need me, and now you show up at my house, call me son, and try to buy me after 18 years? I don't blame you. I'm grateful. Grateful that you gave me real parents who have a sense of conscience and honor. Despite the fact that they have fed me all these years, they have not yet turned you away, but let you into the house and were ready for me to leave with you, I said. I told them that with such rich parents, I would rather starve than stay in this family. My mother, who had raised me, began to cry even more, ran up with my father and hugged me. Those people were surprised by my reaction. They expected something else, that I would fall for all the money and forgive everything. But they forgot something. They didn't bring me up. I made my choice and chased those two away. The next day, a courier arrived at our house. The businessman left me a car and cards with money, but they also sent me a letter of apology with the courier, and also gave me another key. They gave us one of their big houses. "Thank you for raising such a wonderful boy," the letter said.